The following is a reading of Our Story of Atlantis, written down for the Hermetic Brotherhood by W.P. Phelon. This work has been selected by scholars as being culturally important and is part of the knowledge base of civilization as we know it. This work was reproduced from the original artifact and remains as true to the original work as possible. Therefore, you will see the original copyright references, library stamps, as most of these works have been housed in our most important libraries from around the world, and other notations in the work. This work is a public domain in the United States of America and possibly other nations. Within the United States, you may freely copy and distribute this work, as no entity, individual, or corporate has a copyright on the body of the work. As a reproduction of historical artifacts, this work may contain missing or blurred pages, poor pictures, errant marks. Scholars believe, and we concur, that this work is important enough to be preserved, reproduced, and made generally available to the public. We appreciate your support of the preservation process and thank you for being an important part of keeping this knowledge alive and relevant. Forward. It is not necessary for an author in these later days always to be able to say he writes of his own knowledge. This has become a recognized fact. He may write down from another's experience, in whose honesty and reliability he has as much and sometimes more confidence than his own personal sense. This is the case with this little book, treating of a subject of interest to the whole world today. For 6 years I have had the MSS almost ready for the printer. Now, with the encouragement and helping hand of my dear comrades of the Hermetic Brotherhood, I am bid to let it go forth. May it be a help to the once Atlantean born, whoever they may be. W.P. Phelon, M.D. Contents, Chapter 1. Poem, Lost Atlantis. Why is this book written? Authorities pointing to the existence of the former continent and city. Definite assertions of destruction by deluge of an island continent. Positively declared testimony of the whirling straws and flotsam and jetsam of the day. Concurrent evidence of the existence and influence of these people on our civilization, page 1. Our Story of Atlantis, Chapter 1, The Lost Atlantis. Fair Atlantis, peerless country, lulled within the ocean's arms, lying beautiful and shining far beneath the storm's alarms. Never has a plague come near thee, in thy halls were love and ease. Now above thee, lost Atlantis, roll the ever restless seas. In these histories, half tradition, with their mythical thread of gold, we shall find the name and story. Our story of thy cities fair and old, dreaming hard, has told in fancy, wandering minstrel sung of thee. Now, above thee, lost Atlantis, rolls the ever restless sea. Every heart has such a country, some Atlantis loved and lost, whereupon the gleaming sandbars, whence life's fitful ocean tossed. Mighty cities rose in splendor, love was monarch of that clime. Now above that lost Atlantis rolls the restless sea of time. Happy he who, looking backward from a life of a larger scope, deems a youthful idle fancy his lost continent of hope, or by light of love and gladness find the present home sublime, glad that over his Atlantis rolls the restless sea of time. Why is this book written? Is the most pertinent question asked of an author at the outset of composition. It is echoed and re-echoed by critic and reader upon its publication. It certainly appears to be a fair question, whenever the subject seems so much out of the route of ordinary information as the present volume. The scattered records of the past within the historical period will apparently yield scarcely enough material to make a short magazine article of any interest, to say anything of swelling in size to the dignity of a book. It is now conceded, however, by our wisest scientists that every configuration and corresponding circumstance points to the possibility of the existence of the island continent in the neighborhood, if not directly over the Great West Indian archipelago, such as the whole configuration of the North American continent, tells the story of an inland sea that broke through its barriers at the Thousand Islands in the St. Lawrence River and hurling itself over Niagara Falls, left the habitable valley of the Mississippi as a legacy to a man for future settlement. The sacred writings of all nations concur in the same declaration and statement of disaster to some portion of the earth, most generally including all. In a late issue of Mind appears an article headed "A Monument to Atlantis," which says, "A notable discovery of more than ordinary interest for historians, especially those who have a leaning towards antiquities, have lately been made by the well-known archaeologist Augustus Laplanche. This discovery should particularly attract the attention of Americans, since it enables them to lay claim to the most important monuments of ancient times. The edifice in question is the Pyramid of Xochicalco, standing 5,396 feet above the level of the sea and situated to the southwest of Cuernavaca, 60 miles from the city of Mexico. For more than a century, the pyramid has been occasionally visited by distinguished travelers, including the learned Humboldt, but none succeeded in discovering the purpose of which the monument had been erected, nor in deciphering the mysteries inscriptions on the side. As far back as 1886, Dr. Laplanche published his alphabetic key to the Maya hieroglyphs, comparing these with the ancient Egyptian Hermetic alphabet. He has now found that the signs on the pyramid of Xochicalco are both Mayan and Egyptian, and a careful study of these decorative inscriptions has made it plain to him that the pyramid was a monumental structure erected to commemorate the submergence and destruction of the great land of Mu, Plato's Atlantis, together with its population of 64 million of human beings about 11,500 years ago. Dr. Laplanche, on his remarkable work, Queen Mu and Egyptian Sphinx, gives 4 Maya accounts of the same cataclysm. This, then, is the fifth and is, in his own opinion, the most important of all known records in Maya language of the appalling event that gave rise to the story of a universal deluge that is found in the sacred books of the Jews, the Christians, and the Mohammeds. These records on stone, on sun-dried bricks, on papyrus all tell the same story. The little we know of the Aztecs is also confirmatory of the same fact. Whence came the people of South America with their advanced civilization and traditions of the past? What mighty people built the great cities and temples of the now forest-covered of Yucatan and Central America? With their carved glyphs and correspondences to the hieroglyphs of the valley of the Nile and the East India entablatures, and moreover, an almost precisely similar style of architecture to those of Egypt and India. It is reasonable to suppose that there was no common bond of fellowship between all these. The ancient Egyptian ideas have dominated the world down to the present day. Instead of a mummy case, we often use a coffin for our dead. The idea is the same. Departed ghost was to be saved the trouble of making a new body, perhaps at short notice at the great day of the resurrection. The Trinity and unity of God now universally received was an Egyptian idea, and the same is wrought into the stone tablets which Lapange and his amiable wife have unearthed in the forest of the Mayas and Quiches. If the nation of these are but the feeble remnants had not disappeared by some cataclysmic climax, we must certainly have had some later historical data. As the mind of the present generation is more largely than ever desires of truth, the idea of astral presentation and perception may not be without its weight, especially as the books of wisdom of the past declare that automatic books of records are kept of all deeds and manifestations upon the earth. It may be asked why those who have entered into the rest of the unseen should be at all concerned in the unfoldment and development of the race. Who are we ever toiling over the rocky path of the planet? Is the doctrine of reincarnation is true? Then would it not be to the interest of those coming egos, for all the race of men to be advanced just as far as possible, so that the reincarnated from time to time might receive the highest advantage attainable from their touch with the earth at any particular time? Those who are coming back into the present civilization, if they were of the advanced cultured classes of Atlantis and the most ancient Egypt, would find more advantages of acquirement through our leisure experience than when we hurled into life amid the horrors and darkness of the Stone Age. From time to time, the material and data obtained as hereafter described, from which this book is made, has been pressed upon my attention as something that would be of use and interest to all who are seeking to know. I do not doubt the authenticity of my information, nor the statements given as facts by those who were so kind and courteous as to make the writer their mouthpiece in this recollection of ancient memories. I do not doubt that to many readers this come fleeting glimpses of the scenes as if they had been part of them. It is a conceded fact there have never been, since the fall of Atlantis, so many reincarnated Atlanteans upon the earth at the same time as now. This accounts for the almost universal demand out of the astral records for the forgotten knowledge of the occult, which they were recorded. This also explains the readiness of the public mind to perceive knowledge of the doctrines of mental healing, spiritualism, theosophy, and occultism in all its branches. Ignatius Donnelly finds a supporter of his Atlantis theory in Sir Daniel Wilson, president of the University of Toronto, who declares, after a great deal of search, that the lost Atlantis was not a myth, but it was really a part of the continent of America. He accounts for its disappearance from view in a different way, but that is merely incidental. Donnelly's theory was that the land was submerged by some great volcanic upheaval, and that from those who escaped into the continents of Europe and Asia came the tradition of the deluge. Sir Daniel rejects the explanation as being disproved by the fact that there are no traces of such volcanic action either on the continent or in the ocean bed. He believes that the ancient Egyptians, the most progressive and adventurous people of ancient times, discovered the continent, but that in the decline of both of their learning and power it became lost to view and existed at the time of knowledge of Egypt begins merely as a shadowy tradition. It is his opinion that traces of the Egyptians of those days are to be sought in the ruined cities of Central America, whose origins has never been determined nor ever been made the basis of any reasonable theory. Such a discovery would furnish a substantial basis for the legend of the lost Atlantis, and the theory invests those wonderful ruins with a new interest for antiquarians.